And Paul writes that letter to the Corinthians because there's big problems there. Corinth is a port city, big, large, crowded, and sort of on the southern part of Greece today, if you think about it. And Paul spent 1.5 years there establishing a church in Corinth. And now, several years later, he's off on another missionary journey, and he's getting reports back that the church in Corinth has divided into factions, at least 3 factions, led by different people. They're people had picked a leader. One was St. Paul, one was St. Peter, one was Apollos, this preacher. And the factions and the divisions between them were getting worse because each group was boasting that theirs was the right faction, the right faith. It kind of reminds you of the split in churches, like in Protestant churches, how they continually split. And so Paul says, he calls them to unity. And they were making it even worse because they were, as he says, basking in the glory of heaven. So it's like the sin of presumption. In other words, we're right, we got it, we're going to heaven, it's over, Now we just have to, it's a waiting game. And Paul gets really upset with that. And Paul says they're not acting like Christians, they're acting like pagans. And he talks about how, that there's just one Christ and there's one church. And he calls them back to unity under that one church, to imitate Christ in there. And then he chastises them. I mean, it's a severe chastisement. And he does it with sarcasm. He calls them rich, satisfied kings. And to show them how far off track they are, he compares this imaginary lofty position that he's as rich, satisfied kings to the humble position of where an apostle is. And he says for the apostles, apostles are a spectacle, fools for Christ. They're weak, they're hungry, they're thirsty, they're poorly clad, they're roughly treated, they're treated as the scum of the earth. And he goes on and on with different things about how apostles are. And so, that it's hard for us to catch that because we don't know what's going on, at the time there in Corinth. But Paul is really blasting them. But then to sort of remove the sting of that chastisement, he reminds them of his relationship with them as a father trying to teach them to follow the way that Paul acted, and Paul imitates Christ, and he calls them to do that. And I love the words in today's reading where he talks about what we need to do for Christian unity. How does a Christian act to bring unity among Christians? And he says, when ridiculed, we bless. When persecuted, we endure. And then when slandered, we respond gently. And so Paul's point is it takes a lot of humility and a lot of charity in order to maintain Christian unity. And we can see in our country today, there's like over 10,000 different Christian denominations. So he calls on us, it's not just the Corinthians he's calling us to imitate Christ, to imitate Jesus' humility and Jesus' love and charity for others.